Yo, what's up guys? Today I'm going to show you my top 5 tips for programming MIDI bass. And you're going to want to stick to the end because we're going to go ahead and show you a tip that could save you hours on programming. So let's get to it. All right, tip number 1. Be aware of how a bassist plays. So what do I mean by that? Typically a bass player is going to play the lower notes at a harder or louder volume than the higher notes. And to go into further in detail, you're actually gonna, if you're playing fast, actually the velocity is gonna go down as well, but more so on the higher notes. So if you got a part that's really heavy, and most likely your bass player is gonna be slamming the strings. But if you got a part where he's kind of wailing on the higher end of the strings or the higher strings, generally he's gonna play a little bit lighter. So let me go ahead and show you an example. This song is from my band, Son of Erebus. This is one of the songs that we're working on and that we're actually currently going to be tracking soon. So check that out. Give us a like on Instagram. There's going to be a link in the description. So here we got some bass parts that we programmed. And if you can tell, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys this section in particular here. We got some hard notes. So the darker the red color, the harder it is, and then the lighter the color, the softer the notes are. Now pay attention to these harder notes versus when he gets up to the higher notes. So those are the harder notes, and then check out these lighter notes. And that's tip number 1. So tip number 1 is if a bass player is on the lower strings, program the MIDI notes a little bit harder. If the bass player is on the higher notes, go ahead and program the bass notes a little bit lower in volume. It's really that simple. Now, on to step number 2. Number 2 is to humanize your MIDI notes. Once you take care of the general MIDI, if you can see here at the bottom, each section has like a different velocity going on. Once you kind of set the velocities for each section, you're going to want to randomize your notes. So going back to that same example, we're going to use this section now. Different example, excuse me. As you can tell, each note, even though it's kind of in the same range of velocities, has some variance in it. No two notes are played the same. This is also going to add to that realism. The higher notes per string still have the lower velocities versus the lower notes on the string, but not humanizing the notes versus humanizing, you get a more robotic sound if you don't do that. So I'll give you an example here. If I set all of them to 80% and they just flat it out like that, check out how robotic that sounds. Versus what we had before. A lot more human sounding, a lot more natural sounding actually. All right, tip number 3 is to contrast your guitar parts with bass lines. Now, everyone wants the bass to hold it down. Yeah, you could totally have the bass copying what you want it to copy on the guitar. I, however, find it's much more interesting to have the bass playing different things on the rather than the guitar is playing. This is going to make your songs a lot more interesting. You can also do this by having the bass follow the drum parts more than the guitar parts, meaning that it's going to have more of the rhythmic values of the drums versus the guitar parts. And also, if you have an understanding of music theory, you can then use things like counterpoint and adding the fifth or the third to certain chords on the guitar that will add a different sonic character than just blindly following the root note of the guitar parts. So I'm going to show you an example here. It's very brief. Here is a section that is going to lead into a part that contrasts the guitar part. The guitar part is playing some chords, and I programmed a tapping part on the bass to give the rhythm section a bit movement while my guitar player is playing his chords. That to me is much more interesting than if the bass player had just followed what the guitar player was playing. That is a much more interesting part than someone just copying and blindly following what the guitar part is doing. That leads me into tip number 4, which is using a high quality VST. Now, I use Grove Bass by Submission Audio. In my opinion, they make the best bass VSTs on the market. Here's one that I've used before. I want you guys to really hear how the differences are on these two. When you have a really high quality bass VST, it makes it extremely simple to program bass that sounds real. The samples are a lot better. The articulations are a lot better. All of that contributes to having a much more realistic bass performance. So I'm going to contrast the two performances. Here is the shreddage bass. And here is the Grove bass. Some people might not even tell that that's fake. So that is tip number 4. Use an extremely high quality bass VST. And tip number 5 is to use libraries that have articulations. This ties directly in with the last tip. When you usually get high quality VSTs, they come with high quality articulations, such as the tapping articulation and Grove bass. So we're going to use that as our example for tip number 5 to showcase the high quality articulations you get when you actually take the time to purchase a high quality VST. Here is no articulation. Here's with articulation. I'm going to quickly show you behind the scenes what's going on here. So we have these articulations here, and then here's the tapping one, A sharp -2, which I have, I believe, highlighted here. And then this second articulation is to force the string. So on this right side here, you got some strings that says force B string. Some bass VSTs I've seen have this, some others I haven't seen this, but essentially you're forcing the program to use a specific string. So if I delete these, you're going to see it kind of jumping around. However, once I add the tapping articulation and the force string articulation, it's on one string and it's being tapped on one string. So the combination of those two articulations is what's going to give you the realistic tapping effect on this particular bass VST. All right, and bonus tip. This is something that I utilize extremely often. This is to use audio to Midi to go ahead and write your bass lines. Every DAW has some form of function, but I use what's called Melodyne to accomplish this, and it looks like this. It detects my notes, as you can see here, and converts them into Midi. It even has the Midi laid out here. And all you got to do is drag it onto a Midi track, put your bass VST of choice on there, and manipulate the notes until it sounds great. Now that saves you a tons of time instead of sitting there for hours clicking each note in and all that stuff. You still have to program the articulations though. You still have to program the four strings and anything else you might need, but the basis and foundation of what notes you're going to be using will be there within seconds. Now I'm going to play you a little bit of the song so that you guys have context on how a really well programmed MIDI bass performance sounds in the context of a mix. No complaints there. So if you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe. And if you want more in-depth training on topics like this, click the link below. I'd appreciate you guys if you guys also left a comment so I can kind of see if you guys can help me get to 500 subscribers so I could do polls, so I can poll you guys and we can get topics that everyone can enjoy. Thanks so much and peace out.